Something doesn't feel right. I whispered to myself as I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, the words blinking back at me like a warning. The rain hammered the pavement outside, each drop splattering against the windshield of the cab I had reluctantly flagged, turning the city lights into a blurred watercolor of golds and reds. My hands trembled around the damp leather strap of my purse, the anxiety curling in my stomach like ice. I had agreed to this dinner only out of politeness, and now every instinct screamed that tonight was a mistake. As the cab swerved around a puddle, I caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection of the rain-slicked windows, a sleek black SUV sliding silently into the lane beside us. The driver's door opened, and he stepped out. Derek Montclair, tall, impeccably dressed, his dark hair slicked back and eyes the color of storm clouds, scanning the street with an intensity that froze me in place. My pulse spiked, breath catching in my throat, as he closed the distance effortlessly, each step precise, controlled, the world narrowing to the space between us. The cab driver honked, oblivious, but the sound was distant, muffled, replaced by the electric tension that vibrated in the air. Derek stopped a mere foot away, hands relaxed but eyes locked on mine, assessing, calculating, commanding without a single word. I wanted to move, to turn and flee, but my feet were rooted, each heartbeat hammering in my ears like a drum. "You shouldn't be here," I managed to whisper, voice quivering, almost swallowed by the storm around us. He tilted his head, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, yet it held no humor, only a promise of precision and control. "And yet," he said, his voice low, rich, carrying a weight that pressed against my chest, "here you are." My mind scrambled, every escape route dissolving under the intensity of his presence, the rain washing over us in sheets that made the pavement gleam like polished obsidian. In that moment, a horn blared somewhere down the street, snapping me slightly out of the haze, but the spell didn't break. Derek's gaze remained pinned to mine, steady, unwavering, a tether I couldn't ignore. He gestured subtly toward the sidewalk, and I followed instinctively, our steps synchronized without a word, each movement echoing the silent rhythm of control he exerted effortlessly. I glanced up at him as we passed beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, the light catching his jawline, sharp, immovable, the kind of face that belonged on currency, carved from marble and authority. My chest tightened as I realized that something fundamental had shifted in the last few minutes. I had walked into a storm I couldn't outrun, a presence I couldn't deny, and the line between fear and fascination blurred, leaving a raw, magnetic pull I had no choice but to follow. And as we reached the corner where the city seemed to hold its breath with us, he looked down, a single, deliberate motion, his voice cutting through the ambient rain. "Tonight, nothing will let you go." My stomach flipped, my heart surged, and I knew this was only the beginning, the first pulse of a night that would change everything, leaving me caught between the safety I craved and the power he radiated, a dangerous, intoxicating promise hanging in the wet air around us. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of street lamps that reflected off puddles like scattered stars. Sophie Harrison followed Derek Montclair without a word, each step echoing against the wet asphalt, her heart still racing from the intensity of their encounter. The city around them seemed both familiar and alien, transformed by the tension that hung between them, thick enough to taste. Derek guided her to a small, nearly empty square, the neon sign from a coffee shop flickering overhead, casting elongated shadows that danced across the cobblestones. He stopped abruptly, turning to face her, the movement fluid, deliberate, a silent command that drew her gaze to his. His eyes were unwavering, scanning hers with the precision of someone used to measuring risks and intentions in a single glance. Sophie swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his attention press into her chest, a mix of anticipation and apprehension that made her knees weak. "Do not be afraid," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority that had immobilized her moments ago, yet there was a calmness beneath it that suggested control rather than threat. She nodded almost imperceptibly, forcing herself to breathe, the cool air filling her lungs, mingling with the faint scent of rain and leather from his coat. The puddles at their feet reflected the distorted silhouettes of their figures, stretching and bending, and Sophie felt a strange, surreal detachment, as if the world had contracted to just this square, just this moment. Derek gestured toward a nearby bench, and they walked in tandem, a synchronized rhythm that felt both natural and orchestrated, each movement deliberate, measured. Once seated, he leaned slightly forward, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, still holding her gaze. The sounds of the city faded into a muted backdrop, the distant honk of a car, the hum of a streetlight, the patter of droplets falling from a gutter. Sophie felt the adrenaline ebb slightly, replaced by a heightened awareness, every sense sharp, every detail amplified. She noticed the subtle scar near his temple, the crisp fold of his coat, the faint gleam in his stormy eyes as they tracked her reactions. "I need you to understand," he continued, his tone softer now, more deliberate, "that some things tonight were unavoidable. You did not cause them, nor could you control them. But now that we are here, you have a choice in what comes next." Sophie felt her pulse quicken again, uncertainty and curiosity intertwining, her mind racing with possibilities she had not considered when she first left her apartment. Derek's hand hovered momentarily near hers, an unspoken gesture, testing boundaries, offering guidance rather than command, the electricity between them both thrilling and unnerving. The distant glow of the city lights reflected off his eyes, and Sophie realized that every instinct she had, every warning she had felt before, was now interwoven with a strange sense of trust, a fragile but undeniable tether. The rain-soaked streets and the quiet hum of the city formed a cocoon around them, isolating this encounter from the rest of the world. Sophie shifted slightly, drawing in a deep breath, feeling the dampness of her hair cling to her neck, the coolness of the night air brush against her skin, and knew that the night was far from over. Every glance, every movement from Derek suggested that more was coming, a revelation, a direction, a momentum that neither of them could yet define, but that would pull them forward together. The anticipation hung in the air like charged static, promising that the path ahead would be both unpredictable and magnetic. And as Sophie met his gaze again, she understood that whatever awaited was only beginning to reveal itself. The first thread of a night that would change everything, leaving her suspended between the safety she had known and the intrigue that Derek embodied, a silent, inescapable pull that would guide her through the darkness and beyond. The city had quieted slightly as the rain diminished to a fine mist, leaving the streets shimmering under the amber glow of streetlights and neon signs. Sophie Harrison followed Derek Montclair closely, every instinct alert, senses sharpened by the lingering tension of their initial encounter. Their footsteps echoed in tandem against the wet pavement, a rhythm that felt both foreign and oddly grounding. Derek paused near a small, secluded plaza tucked between two high-rise buildings, the mist curling around the edges of the square like smoke. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes held a gravity that demanded attention. "Sophie, there are things about tonight you need to understand," he said calmly, voice steady, carrying a weight that made every word resonate in her chest. She nodded, swallowing hard, the chill in the air crawling up her neck as her heart continued to race. The distant hum of traffic, the occasional drip of water from a building gutter, and the faint buzz of a streetlight filled the silence between them, amplifying the tension in a way that made every second feel elongated. Derek gestured toward a small, wrought iron bench under the glow of a flickering lamp, and they moved toward it together, each step deliberate, measured, a silent agreement forming without a single word. Once seated, Derek leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, maintaining eye contact that felt simultaneously invasive and magnetic. Sophie could feel the weight of his scrutiny, every detail of her posture, every subtle shift in her expression cataloged with precision. Her pulse quickened at the awareness that he observed not only her movements, but the thought processes she tried to conceal. "You have a decision tonight," Derek continued, voice calm, yet imbued with authority that seemed to shape the air around them. "Not about where you will go, but about how you will respond to what is coming." She drew in a steadying breath, the mist cool against her skin, grounding her in the moment even as the anticipation coiled in her stomach. The distant glow of the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, capturing fragments of their silhouettes, stretching and bending, creating a visual echo of the tension that hung between them. Derek's hand moved slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture that suggested a protective presence rather than ownership, a guidance through the uncertainty rather than a command. Sophie felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension, the combination unsettling yet impossible to ignore. Each sound around them, the distant footsteps of a late-night pedestrian, the soft whoosh of a passing car, the gentle dripping of water from a ledge, seemed to heighten her awareness, sharpening the contrast between the ordinary and the extraordinary. She realized that the city itself had receded into the background, leaving only the plaza, the mist, and the intensity of Derek's presence to define the space. Her thoughts raced, considering the unpredictability of the night, the magnetism of his focus, and the subtle but undeniable sense of safety that his proximity provided. As they sat together, Sophie sensed that the night was far from over, that the path ahead would be filled with revelations, choices, and moments that would challenge her expectations. And as Derek's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching, she understood that every instinct she had, every caution she had held, was now interwoven with a new awareness, a recognition that the encounter had shifted something fundamental, creating a connection that was compelling, inescapable, and only beginning to unfold. The mist had thinned to a delicate haze, leaving the city shimmering with reflections that danced across the slick pavement. Sophie Harrison shifted slightly on the bench, her coat damp against the cool night air, eyes drawn to Derek Montclair as he observed her with a stillness that seemed to command the space around them. Every detail of his posture, the slight lean of his shoulders, the way his hands rested lightly on his knees, carried a precision that made her acutely aware of her own movements. She could feel the electricity in the air, a tension that was both exhilarating and unnerving, compelling her to remain present despite the uncertainty that hovered around them. The distant sound of a late-night cafe closing, the faint hum of a streetlight, and the soft drip of water from a nearby fire escape became a rhythm to which her pulse unconsciously synchronized. Derek finally spoke, his voice measured yet penetrating. "Sophie, there are choices you will need to make, but not all of them are visible right now." She tilted her head, searching his eyes for a hint, a clue, anything that could prepare her for what was coming. But his expression was a mask of calm control, allowing nothing to slip through. The city around them felt suspended, as though the night itself had conspired to hold its breath, giving weight to the moment, and Sophie could not deny the magnetism of his presence, the pull that seemed to anchor her despite her racing thoughts. A gentle breeze swirled through the plaza, tugging at her hair, brushing her cheeks with the faint scent of rain and concrete, and she drew a steadying breath, trying to ground herself. Derek shifted slightly, the movement deliberate, his gaze sweeping the plaza as if measuring every potential outcome, every unseen possibility, yet always returning to her, reaffirming her significance in a silent, unspoken dialogue. "Do you understand why tonight feels different?" he asked, voice low, intimate in its clarity, and Sophie nodded slowly, her mind racing yet her body attentive to the nuances of his tone, the subtle shifts in his posture that conveyed more than words could. She realized that this encounter was more than an accident, more than a fleeting moment of tension. It was an intersection of decisions, an invisible web of consequence that began the instant they had met, and now held her attention with an intensity that left her both anxious and captivated. The mist curled around them like a gentle veil, the distant city lights reflecting off puddles, painting the plaza with fractured colors and shadows, and Sophie felt the weight of potential paths stretching before her, each one uncertain, each one imbued with the undeniable presence of Derek Montclair's controlled, deliberate influence. She sensed that the night was far from over, that the rhythm of their interaction, the subtle push and pull of tension and understanding, would guide the unfolding of events yet unseen. Every glance, every measured gesture from Derek carried a significance she could not ignore, and as the city continued its quiet nocturnal pulse around them, Sophie understood that the moments to come would demand attention, courage, and a willingness to follow a path that had begun with a simple, inexplicable pull, leading her toward revelations and choices that would shape the night and perhaps her understanding of control, trust, and the unexpected connections that could emerge in the spaces between fear and fascination. The night deepened, the city lights reflecting off the damp streets in long, fractured streaks, turning puddles into mirrors that shimmered with gold, red, and green. Sophie Harrison followed Derek Montclair through the narrow alleyways with a cautious curiosity, her senses alert to every shift in the air, every distant sound, every flicker of light. The rhythm of their footsteps created a subtle harmony with the soft drip of water from fire escapes and the occasional distant hum of traffic, grounding her even as anticipation coiled tightly in her stomach. Derek's presence was unwavering beside her, a constant current of control and composure that contrasted sharply with her racing thoughts and heightened awareness. He gestured toward a small, secluded courtyard illuminated by the soft glow of a single street lamp, and Sophie moved forward instinctively, guided by the magnetic pull of his focus. As they reached the center, Derek paused, letting the silence settle around them like a tangible weight, the cool night air brushing against her cheeks and hair. She could see the subtle details of him in the lamplight, the precise crease of his coat, the slight tilt of his head, the intensity of his eyes that seemed to catalog every nuance of her expression, her posture, her hesitation. "You have more control than you realize," he said, his voice low, deliberate, and steady, carrying an authority that demanded attention without imposing force. Sophie swallowed, drawing in a deep breath that filled her lungs with the crisp, damp air, trying to ground herself while absorbing the gravity of his words. Her pulse continued to quicken, an undeniable awareness of the moment pressing into her chest, making her keenly aware of every sensation. The wetness of her shoes against the stone pavement, the gentle brush of mist against her skin, the faint scent of rain mixed with the subtle warmth of the city around them. Derek stepped slightly closer, yet maintained the respectful distance that both intrigued and unsettled her, his gaze unwavering, reading her as if her thoughts were laid bare. "There are choices ahead," he continued, his tone calm but charged. "Paths that will require attention, careful thought, and an understanding that what you perceive is only part of the whole picture." Sophie nodded slowly, her thoughts racing to catch up with the intensity of his presence, the pull of the night, the charged quiet of the city around them. Every instinct told her that this moment was pivotal, that the rhythm of their interaction was building towards something significant, something that would guide the events of the night and shape the decisions she would face. The courtyard, bathed in lamplight and mist, became a private stage for this silent exchange, a space where every glance, every measured movement carried weight and significance. Sophie realized that the uncertainty, the anticipation, and the subtle power dynamics were not threats but invitations to observe, to respond, to engage with the unfolding rhythm between them. As the mist swirled gently around their feet and the distant city noise faded into the background, she felt the full impact of the evening, a blend of fear, curiosity, and trust intertwining in a delicate balance that would dictate the unfolding of the night. Derek's gaze held hers, steady and unrelenting, suggesting that the night's true course was only beginning to reveal itself, and that every step, every decision, every measured breath would matter in the moments to come, leaving Sophie suspended in the tension, drawn into the unfolding path with both caution and a reluctant anticipation that kept her rooted yet eager to follow. The mist had started to lift slightly, revealing the outlines of buildings that glimmered faintly in the residual glow of the city lights, and Sophie Harrison felt the weight of the night pressing both outward and inward, filling her senses with anticipation and the unknown. Derek Montclair remained beside her, his presence steady and deliberate, a constant in a world that had suddenly become unpredictable, his eyes scanning the environment while maintaining an unwavering focus on her reactions. The subtle sound of dripping water from a nearby awning punctuated the quiet, a rhythm that synchronized with her own heightened awareness, each heartbeat echoing against the cobblestones beneath their feet. Derek motioned toward a narrow passageway leading to a quiet, enclosed garden tucked between two apartment blocks, the wrought iron gate slightly ajar, inviting yet restrained, as if offering them a private stage away from the lingering hum of the city. Sophie followed, senses sharpened, noting the way his steps aligned with hers. Silent coordination that felt both natural and orchestrated. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of rain-soaked earth, mingling with the subtle aroma of leather from Derek's coat, creating a sensory backdrop that anchored her despite the swirl of nerves and curiosity within. He stopped just inside the garden, turning to her with a calm but commanding presence, the lamplight catching the angles of his face, highlighting the intensity of his gaze. "This space is yours to observe," he said, voice measured, steady, filled with a quiet assurance that contrasted with the storm of emotion inside her. Sophie could feel the pull of the moment, the magnetic tension that seemed to radiate from him, a force both compelling and grounding, demanding her full attention. She took a slow breath, allowing the cool night air to fill her lungs, feeling the crispness against her skin, and let her eyes roam the enclosed garden, taking in the geometric lines of the hedges, the faint glimmer of puddles reflecting the soft lamplight, and the subtle movement of mist curling around the edges. Derek's hand hovered near hers briefly, a silent gesture of guidance rather than command, offering reassurance and a shared focus without breaking the rhythm of their interaction. Sophie sensed the deliberate restraint, the quiet power behind his measured movements, and it drew her attention, her thoughts converging on the realization that this encounter was shaping a new dynamic between them, one of awareness, understanding, and subtle influence. Every element of the garden, the soft rustle of leaves, the gentle trickle of a hidden fountain, the damp aroma of the earth, heightened her perception, turning the ordinary into a space of discovery and anticipation. Derek's voice cut softly through the night, suggesting paths, possibilities, and the significance of careful observation, and Sophie felt herself drawn into the rhythm of the interaction, her mind racing yet attentive, aware of the potential unfolding before her. The night seemed to stretch, each second charged with subtle promise, every glance and gesture carrying weight, the city around them fading to the background, leaving only the garden, the mist, and the shared, unspoken dialogue between them. As she looked at Derek, calm and composed in the lamplight, she understood that the evening's trajectory was only beginning to reveal itself, that each decision, each observation, would influence the moments ahead, shaping an intricate dance of anticipation, insight, and the magnetic pull of presence that neither could ignore. The garden seemed to hold its own quiet universe, mist curling gently around the trimmed hedges and reflecting the lamplight in delicate ripples. Sophie Harrison stepped carefully along the stone path, her shoes clicking softly against the damp surface, her thoughts still tangled with the tension and anticipation that had accompanied her since the cab ride. Derek Montclair walked beside her, a measured presence, observing her movements with an intensity that made the ordinary details of the garden, wet leaves, small puddles, the faint scent of damp earth, feel electrified, alive, and deeply significant. He stopped near a low stone fountain, its gentle trickle blending with the distant city sounds to create a soft ambient rhythm that heightened her awareness. She inhaled sharply, drawing in the cool night air, and felt a strange sense of clarity amid the lingering apprehension. Derek gestured toward the fountain, and she understood immediately, wordlessly, that this was a moment to pause, to observe, to absorb the nuances of their shared space. His gaze held hers, unwavering, yet soft, carrying a reassurance that contrasted with the intensity that had dominated their previous interactions. Every subtle movement, every breath, felt synchronized, a silent dialogue unfolding in the quiet garden. Sophie noted the curve of the lamplight on his features, the calm deliberation in his stance, and the way his eyes seemed to catalog her reactions, not with judgment, but with careful consideration. The distant hum of the city receded further, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves, the gentle drip of water, and the measured cadence of their presence. Derek's voice broke the silence, low, deliberate, and imbued with subtle authority. "Sophie, it is in moments like these that clarity emerges, that one begins to understand the choices before them and the paths that lie ahead." She nodded, heart still racing, yet a part of her felt steadied by his calm, his assured control, and the strange magnetism of his attention. The mist swirled around their feet, as if mirroring the interplay of tension and calm, of curiosity and awareness that defined their interaction. Every sense Sophie possessed was heightened. The coolness of the night air against her skin, the faint scent of rain lingering in the soil, the muted glint of lamplight across the wet stones, and each element seemed to emphasize the significance of the shared silence. Derek leaned slightly forward, his hands resting lightly on his knees, eyes never leaving hers. And for a moment the world contracted to that garden, to the faint ripples in the fountain, to the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them. Sophie felt the pull of anticipation coiling gently within her, the sense that the night was still unfolding, that each observation, each decision, each measured movement would carry meaning beyond the immediate moment. The night air felt alive, charged with possibility, and as she drew in a deep, steadying breath, she realized that the connection forming between them was as subtle as it was profound, a tether of attention, curiosity, and trust that would guide the unfolding of the evening. Every detail, every gesture, every pause contributed to a rhythm she could not yet fully decipher but felt compelled to follow, knowing that the moments ahead held revelation, insight, and the quiet but undeniable pull of presence that marked the night as extraordinary and transformative. The night had settled into a deep, velvet quiet, with only the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional flicker of streetlights punctuating the darkness, and Sophie Harrison felt a strange mixture of anticipation and apprehension as she followed Derek Montclair through the winding paths of the garden. Each step she took was measured, conscious of the subtle dampness under her shoes, the faint rustle of leaves, and the lingering mist that swirled around them, creating an almost otherworldly cocoon that separated them from the rest of the city. Derek moved beside her with the calm authority that had defined the evening, his presence steady and deliberate, and Sophie felt herself drawn into the rhythm of their interaction, noticing how every small gesture, every slight movement of his hands or shift in his posture carried an unspoken significance that she could not ignore. They stopped beneath a softly glowing lamp that cast elongated shadows across the cobblestones, and Derek turned toward her, his expression unreadable yet magnetic, the faint light reflecting in the stormy depths of his eyes. "Sophie," he began, his voice low and deliberate, each word carefully chosen to command attention. "The night is far from over, and what you have sensed, felt, and observed is only the beginning." She nodded, heart still racing, the cool air brushing her cheeks and the lingering scent of rain mingling with the subtle warmth emanating from him, creating a sensation that was both grounding and electrifying. Derek gestured toward a secluded alcove where the hedges formed a natural enclosure, offering a sense of privacy and focus amidst the open space of the garden, and they walked together in silent coordination, their movements almost choreographed by the unspoken understanding between them. The distant sounds of the city faded further, leaving only the faint trickle of water from a nearby fountain and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, forming a backdrop that heightened Sophie's awareness of every detail, every nuance of Derek's presence, and the subtle interplay of tension and calm that defined their shared space. He stopped, letting the quiet stretch between them, and for a moment Sophie felt the weight of anticipation coil within her like a tightly wound spring, her senses attuned to the smallest shifts in the night air, the flicker of light across the stones, and the unwavering focus of Derek's gaze. "There are decisions to be made," he said quietly, his voice carrying the gravity of someone accustomed to navigating the unseen and the unknown, and understanding the significance of each step is essential. Sophie drew a deep breath, feeling the mist settle gently against her skin, and recognized the delicate balance of trust, attention, and awareness that now defined their interaction, a dynamic that was intricate, compelling, and quietly commanding. Every heartbeat, every glance, every subtle movement became a part of an unspoken dialogue that neither needed to break with words, the night itself holding them in a suspended state of anticipation. She realized that the path ahead would demand focus, patience, and careful observation, and that the rhythm of the evening, guided by Derek's measured presence, would shape the unfolding moments, each one a piece of a larger, unfolding story that neither could yet fully predict, but that she was irresistibly drawn to witness, absorb, and navigate. The mist had thinned further, leaving the garden bathed in the pale, silvery glow of streetlights that reflected softly off the damp stones. And Sophie Harrison felt a subtle shift in the air, a tension mingled with anticipation that made each step deliberate and heightened her awareness of every sound, every shadow, every movement around them. Derek Montclair walked beside her, composed and deliberate, his presence both commanding and quietly reassuring, creating a rhythm she instinctively followed without question, her senses finely tuned to the nuances of his movements and the soft cadence of the night. They paused near a small, circular fountain, its water still gently rippling from the earlier rain, and he turned to her with an intensity that made the world around them seem to fade into insignificance. "Sophie," he began, his voice steady yet layered with a subtle gravity, "the moments we have experienced tonight are only the beginning, and the choices you make in the next steps will define the path forward." She met his gaze, heart pounding, chest tightening with a mix of nervousness and a growing sense of intrigue, each inhalation drawing in the crisp night air and the faint scent of wet earth, grounding her in the immediacy of the encounter. Derek's hand moved slightly, a near imperceptible gesture of guidance, neither imposing nor distant, signaling a subtle invitation for trust, for awareness, for participation in the unspoken dialogue unfolding between them. Sophie felt the tension of the night press into her awareness, every detail magnified, the delicate flutter of leaves in the gentle breeze, the faint echo of distant traffic, the subtle reflections of lamplight across puddles, and she realized that these small elements were amplifying the significance of their shared space. His eyes remained fixed on hers, unwavering, assessing, yet with a calm steadiness that invited her to lean into the connection rather than recoil from it. The garden, framed by dark hedges and punctuated by lamplight, seemed to exist outside the regular passage of time, allowing each second to stretch, carrying weight and meaning, and Sophie felt the magnetic pull of the evening, an inexorable draw that compelled her to stay present, alert, and engaged. Derek's voice cut through the delicate stillness again, deliberate and measured, emphasizing understanding, perception, and the importance of awareness, and Sophie absorbed each word, noting the subtle cadence, the controlled intensity, and the quiet assurance in every inflection. As they stood together, the mist curling around their feet, she felt the evening's trajectory unfold with deliberate precision, each glance, each breath, each movement a note in a silent symphony of attention, anticipation, and latent possibility. She recognized that the connection between them, built on observation, awareness, and subtle influence, was establishing a new rhythm for the night, a flow that would guide every moment to come. The city beyond the garden seemed distant and muted, leaving only the interplay of presence, attention, and awareness between them, a quiet but compelling force that promised continued intrigue, unfolding choices, and the inevitability of shared experience. And as Derek's gaze held hers with unwavering focus, Sophie understood that the evening was far from complete, that each second of anticipation and observation would cascade into the next, leaving her fully immersed in the magnetism of the night and the subtle, unspoken dialogue that bound them together, a tether of attention and curiosity that would not be broken easily and was only beginning to reveal its depth.